So I'm not really a fan of grounding techniques and meditation as it relates to working with dissociation. And I'm not saying that it never works. I'm not saying that it's not helpful, and I'm certainly not saying that it's not helpful for you if it has been helpful for you. I think you should continue doing the things that work. But I do think that it's insufficient frequently. And I feel like what ends up happening is people go to therapy and then they get these like skills and techniques and like you should meditate, and then when it doesn't feel like it's working or they don't feel like they're able to continue doing the thing, then they end up feeling like, well, I guess I'm fucked, because the therapy doesn't really seem to work, and these things that they tell me are supposed to work for most people. I guess I'm not most people because it's definitely not working for me, and then people feel really hopeless and helpless, and they spiral, and it's no fun. So what should we do instead? Hi, my name is Becca Newkirk. I am an LCSW. I specialize in complex trauma, and that means that I work with a lot of dissociating. So first, let's define it. What is dissociating? Dissociating is actually a defense mechanism. It is something that everybody does. I consider dissociation as something that happens on a spectrum. It is not necessarily or like inherently problematic. Sometimes we do it like for small stints of time. Sometimes we do it when we're scrolling our phone, or we may spend like a weekend immersed in some like ridiculous reality TV Netflix thingy. Whatever the thing is, that's fine. It is kind of like escaping, it's kind of like dissociating, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. When dissociating is a problem is when it impacts our ability to do the things that are important to us. So be successful in our pursuits, have like lasting and intimate relationships, or be able to just feel like ourselves and be playful and fun and have like feelings. So dissociation can be conceptualized, I think, a number of different ways. One way to talk about it is it's our brain's unconscious sort of like defense against overwhelming or like overwhelmingly painful stimulus. So if we feel like our environment is really overwhelming and bad, then we might dissociate and separate from it. This is like if you have, I'm going to try not to be graphic. I don't think this is super graphic, but like if somebody has been assaulted, sometimes they'll describe sort of seeing the scene from a bird's eye view, or like as though they were on the ceiling. Medical events, sometimes people can describe the same thing. It actually protects us from the intensity of the experience that's happening. It gives us permission to just survive the moment, and then the idea is that we're going to process it and deal with it later, and the emotions that are related to it later. So sometimes it can just be sort of like a shutdown. Sometimes people can seem very, very flat if they are experiencing dissociation. Alternatively, we can conceptualize dissociation as actually like cartoning off or separating or even compartmentalizing parts of self. So if you've ever had that experience of talking about something that like definitely has a lot of emotion attached to it and you're describing it, but the way that you're describing it is very like flat, like, oh yeah, these things happened and like it's totally fine and I don't have any feelings about it anymore, but like you do, but it just feels like you can't really connect to it. That is more of an example of when our brain is sort of like compartmentalizing. If you take that to an extreme, it can actually get to the point where we have parts of ourselves that are totally separate, distinct, and sort of sectioned off from each other, that respond differently in different situations. That's not really what we're talking about today, but that is an extreme version of what we're talking about. So some ways that people will describe that they are dissociated. They might say, I feel like I'm moving through molasses. I feel like my head is full of cotton. They might say like my body just feels like super heavy. I feel stupid. I feel like I can't think. Or I feel like super tired and like, or I'm even like daydreaming a lot, and I'm doing, I've heard people talk about it as like, I forget the term that they were using, but basically like daydreaming to the point that it is like unhelpful or unhealthy. That's gonna bother me. It's fine. I'll remember it later. So anyway, there are lots of ways to know that you're dissociating, and today what I wanted to like really hone in on is the IFS, or internal family systems, perspective of dissociating and how that can be helpful for you if you dissociate, and why I feel like it is more helpful than maybe more standard grounding techniques and asking someone to meditate or like utilize these skills, etc. So that requires that we talk a little bit about like, what is IFS? Some of you may know, some of you may choose to Google it. There are books about this. I think they're super helpful. But for those of you who do not feel like doing that research, I completely understand. IFS is a way of approaching a person as a constellation of parts. Bear with me. So what that means is that if you have a tendency to, dissociate, we're going to call it your dissociative part, and it has a goal in mind. That goal is to protect you. If you have a tendency to, maybe you have an addiction, right? I drink too much, or I go to sleep when I'm really overwhelmed, or whatever. These are all versions of like protective, like it's intended to soothe whatever pain you're in the moment. It's like sort of numbing, right? There are different types of parts. Another type of part is, they call them the manager parts. So those of you who are very intensely self-critical, or maybe even critical of others, that is typically what we would call like a manager part. So that's a part of you that's like trying to keep shit going. It wants to keep everything like in line. It wants to make sure that everything's productive and happening the way that it's supposed to. And all of this is related to safety, right? So like the firefighters are soothers, those are our dissociators, are like sleeping too muchers, our addictions. Like usually these are like vices is a lot of the, not always, but like often we're talking about vices. The vices we call firefighters. Some people call them soothers. It's just, we want to make it a little bit better right now. This hurts right now. How can I fix it? The managers are a little bit more like, they are looking a little bit further into the future. They're trying to protect you from some horrible outcome that maybe you feel like you have experienced before, or you feel like the threat of it has been like hanging over your head. And so the managers are like, no, we're not going to let that happen. Like, everybody leaves us and then we're all alone and like terrible. We're not going to let that happen. Or like your whole world falls apart and you're a failure and then you have to wear a cone of shame. We're not going to let that happen. So instead, we're going to nitpick you to death. And we're going to like tell you how you're failing every single second of every single day, and it's going to be great because you're going to be successful that way. Lovely. And then the third category, we're not talking about the third category as much today, but I will say it because it's, part of what we're talking about. Those are exiles. Oftentimes exiles, one of the ways to distinguish the exiles is that these are the parts of self that do not have a job. They're not doing anything. They're not trying to protect you from like long-term consequences or like horribleness. They're not trying to like soothe something that's happening in the moment. It is often pain. It's like something that you're actually getting like compartmentalized from. Often it's like some version of shame, some version of like aloneness, some version of like, this just hurts so much that I like don't want to have it anymore. I don't want ownership of it. And so I'm going to like stuff it down under a rug and like throw it away. I'm going to like put it over there, which doesn't work, by the way, but we can talk about that later. Anyway, okay, so what is dissociation? I already kind of said it, but I'm going to say it again just for clarity's sake. Dissociation is a firefighter or a soother, depending on how you want to frame it. That means that it is a part of self, it is a defense mechanism that is intended to keep you from experiencing intense pain or discomfort in the moment. Another way to say that is it's trying to help. It's trying to help. I know it's frustrating. I know it's overwhelming. I know it feels like something that you are not doing on purpose, not choosing, that you might be angry with it, et cetera, et cetera. All of that makes so much sense, and there's space to unpack that and process that. But it's important to be able to recognize the part of you that dissociates, the experience of dissociating, has a function. It is trying to do something good for you. It wants you to be okay. So once we start from there, we start this process of being able to recognize that you're dissociating when you're dissociating, and recognizing secondary to that means that there is something that your brain feels you need to be protected from, right? So something is like intensely uncomfortable, something got triggered, something is happening that it feels like, ooh, this is too much, and so I'm gonna shut it down. Okay, that by itself is helpful. Sit with that for a second. Bring that to your therapist, like work on that. That's a whole process. But once we get to a space where we're kind of like, okay, I can like kind of tell-ish when I'm dissociated, at least like within an hour or so, and I'm able to recognize like pretty quickly that that means that something is overwhelming and difficult here. There are two things that we're trying to do. One is like in our environment and the other is internal. So we got to do both, ideally both. One, so like the environmental stuff is like whatever it is that we can control in our environment. There is some of that, and we can't always control circumstances, right? If you're experiencing a grief event, if like your life is really challenging and painful in that particular moment, like this is just going to happen more often. We can't fix that necessarily, certainly not like sitting down and like just deciding that the thing isn't going to happen. But what we can do is like make some tea. We can like, okay, so here's my metaphor for this. I say this all the time. I'm sure my clients are tired of hearing it, but it's okay. I want you to treat yourself like you have the emotional flu. So if you notice that you're dissociated, something is overwhelming and painful that you have effectively shut yourself off from by dissociating. So the dissociative part feels like it needs to be more active. We are going to treat that like symptoms of the flu. So you're nauseous, you're achy, you feel like shit, everything is terrible. We're gonna do things if you have the flu, like not do your workout that day. You're probably gonna call into work. You're going to put on potentially a like feel good sort of like comfort movie. You're gonna get a blanket and you're going to like make yourself some chicken soup. I would like to point out that none of these things do you expect are going to make you not nauseous or not feverish, okay? If you're taking medication, it might like alleviate some of the symptoms in the moment, but like the soup, the calling out from work, the rest, the like, you still expect that it's gonna take time for that to be able to make a change in the way that you're experiencing. And I want you to think about this the same way. I'm not saying that you need to call out of work every single time you're like dissociating and overwhelmed. What I am saying is I want you to be gentle with yourself and I want you to create environmental stimulus or changes that will make you feel cared for and make being in your body in this moment feel like a more positive option and something that you can actually choose that feels less terrible. Okay, so maybe that's like light some candles, maybe it's put on some music you really like, maybe it's eat a food you really enjoy, maybe it's put on a comfort movie. It can be all sorts of things. The point is that it's gentle. You're making gentle choices for yourself and you're making kind choices for yourself. So that's one direction. That will help regardless, right? You will get better from the flu if you rest and like try to be kind and gentle with yourself than if you just like power through and you're like, well, it's the flu, nothing I can do about it. Guess I'm going to work and like doing all the things like I normally do them and like telling myself to like suck it up, buttercup, because I got to do it. That you're going to be sick longer. Same thing with, trauma activation or like whatever discomfort there is that you're dissociating from. The more you take care of yourself, the more gentle you are with yourself, the more quickly you will be able to alleviate the discomfort that is causing you to feel like you need to dissociate. Whew, that's a mouthful. Okay, so there's the environmental, and then we have an internal aspect, right? And this is like, this gets a little bit like, I don't know, meta, I guess. But basically, if you know anything about IFS, if maybe you like paused the video and like looked it up, what you know is that we're talking about, we've got all these parts. It's a constellation of parts. One of those is your dissociative part. And then you have self. IFS calls it self-energy. I often call it your grounded adultness, your grounded adult self, like the best parts of you, the parts of you that make the kindest, most loving decisions. It's compassionate, it's calm, it's loving, all these like wonderful things. Okay, so we want to start connecting in relationship those two parts of self. We want like the grounded adult in you to be like, hi, dissociated part. Nice to meet you. I see that you're here and I recognize that you're trying to protect me. We're starting with that. And over time, we start to relieve the dissociated part from the responsibility of having to work independently. Now, I think I said earlier in this video, and if I didn't, I should have, that dissociation is like a rudimentary, it's a very young defense mechanism. So the part of you that is doing it, I often conceptualize as like incredibly young, right? we're talking to a small child, basically, right? And so it's trying to help, but it doesn't like know really like the best way to help, right? We're not going to punish the small child for not being able to deal with your adult person life appropriately. But we are going to remove the responsibility that the small child feels for trying to like make your adult person life go correctly, right? We don't want the small child, this dissociative part, making decisions like, oops, your boss wants to talk to you. Time to shut down. Let's go to sleep. Not a great idea. This is not going to function very well right now, right? So over time, and like this is something that I work with, you know, I don't want to give the false impression that this is a simple process. It certainly is not. But if you start practicing with it and you check in with yourself and you're trying to make the connection, over time this will start to feel easier and easier for you to access, and you will start to be able to engage with, negotiate with, and support that dissociative part of yourself so that it becomes a choice, not an unconscious process that is happening despite you, but something that you are choosing how much and whether or not you want to engage with it. So if you like make the decision, let's say it's like the weekend and you're like, I'm overwhelmed, shit feels hard, this was a lot, I have nothing that I have to get done this weekend, I'm just gonna shut the fuck down and I'm gonna like watch some movies and I'm gonna like get takeout because like I cannot. That's okay. Like make the decision, engage that dissociative part, invite it in, like have it sit with you on the couch, like, you know, make some popcorn, like that's okay, right? But make the decision to do it, because the problem is that right now it's happening whether you decide to or not. It's unconscious, and that's what makes it so dangerous. So hopefully that is helpful. There's so much more to say about dissociation, but I feel like this is a quick rundown of how I utilize IFS to interact with dissociation or dissociative parts, how I conceptualize it, and why, hopefully I was able to explain there, why I feel like simple sort of like grounding techniques or meditations are often inadequate and sometimes make people feel worse. Thanks.